Today we're going to be talking about a man who has been called, and I wish I was making this up, the father of history. That's right, the guy who literally invented the discipline of recording history is also one of the most unreliable sources in all of human knowledge. And I think that's beautiful in the worst possible way. His name is Herodotus. He lived around 484 to 425 BC. He was Greek, and he wrote a massive 9-volume work called the Histories, which is basically his attempt to document the Greco-Persian Wars and everything surrounding them. Sounds legit, right? Sounds reasonable. Sounds like exactly what a serious, credible historian should do. Except, and a third except. This man also wrote about the giant gold-digging ants in India. So let's talk about that. Let's start with the basics, because I want to be fair before I'm absolutely unfair. Herodotus was doing something genuinely revolutionary. Before him, history as a written, investigative discipline didn't really exist in the Greek world or the world in general. He traveled extensively through Egypt, Persia, Babylon, Scythia. He talked to people, he gathered accounts, he tried to piece together a coherent narrative of massive world events. That's impressive. That deserves credit. And I'll give him credit. Now let's tear him apart. The first and most fundamental problem with Herodotus is that the man had seriously and absolutely no filter. None. Zero. If someone told him something, he would write it down. It didn't matter if it was plausible. It didn't matter if it contradicted something he'd already written about. A guy at a tavern in Egypt said, "Yeah, there are headless men with faces on their chests living south of here." Herodotus would go, "Fascinating, noted," and put it in the book. He actually describes a tribe called the Blemius, people with no heads, whose lips and eyes are set into their chests. He describes them as the Arimaspi, one-eyed people who fight griffins for gold. He writes about giant ants in India, roughly the size of foxes, that dig up gold dust while burrowing, and the locals have to sneak in and steal it while the ants are distracted. And here's the thing that really kills me. He doesn't even fully commit to these stories. He'll often say something like, "I don't entirely believe this myself, but I'm going to write it down anyway." Which, okay, points for honesty, I guess, but that's like a journalist saying, "I'm not sure that this source is credible, but here's the article." That's not a disclaimer, Herodotus. That's still spreading misinformation. You don't get to launder nonsense by adding allegedly to it. Now let's talk about the Persian Wars, because this is where it gets really interesting and really embarrassing for him. Herodotus claims that Xerxes invaded Greece with an army of 2.6 million soldiers. 2.6 million. That was his estimate for the fighting force, not counting support staff and camp followers, which he adds would have doubled or tripled the number. So he's basically saying that the Persian force that showed up was somewhere between 5 and 8 million people. To put that into perspective, the entire population of ancient Greece at the time was probably around 2 to 3 million people total. Xerxes supposedly showed up with twice the population of the country he was invading. Modern historians estimate the real Persian force was somewhere between 100 and 300,000, which is still enormous, by the way, still a massive invasion force. But it's not 5 million. The logistics alone would have been impossible. You can't move 5 million people across a landmass in the ancient world. The supply chain required to feed that army would have been larger than most ancient economies. Herodotus just didn't think about any of that, I guess. And speaking of not thinking things through, let's discuss his relationship with casualty, which is to say he didn't really have one. Herodotus believed very sincerely in divine intervention, fate, and the idea that historical events were shaped by gods punishing human pride, which is fine, I guess. That's a worldview, but the problem is it completely corrupts his analysis of why things happened. For example, when the Persians lost at Salamis, Herodotus doesn't analyze the Greek naval strategy, the geography of the strait, or the tactical genius that happened. He essentially concludes that, well, the Persians lost because Xerxes was too arrogant and the gods punished him for it. Every major event in his histories gets filtered through this moral framework of hubris and divine retribution, which means he's not really doing history, he's doing theology with names and dates attached. His contemporary Thucydides, who wrote about the Peloponnesian War, had a completely different approach. He was basically the first person to say, gods aside, let's look at the political motivations, strategic decisions, and human psychology. And the historians universally agreed that his methodology was far more rigorous and reliable. The fact that he existed in basically the same era and managed to be much more analytically sound just makes Herodotus look much worse by comparison. You had the better option available in ancient world. You had a guy doing it right in real time. Then there's his treatment of Egypt, which is one of the most fascinating examples of a smart person being confidently and embarrassingly wrong. Herodotus visited Egypt and wrote extensively about it. And some of what he wrote is valuable. He documents customs, geography, religious practices. But he also gets things spectacularly wrong, because he was relying on Egyptian priests who were, let's say, not always forthcoming with foreigners, and because Herodotus himself had a habit of interpreting everything through a Greek lens, he claimed the Egyptians do everything backwards from other people. They knead dough with their feet, but clay with their hands. They write right to left, women go to market, while men stay at home weaving. Some of this is real, but some of it is also exaggerated, and some of it is just wrong. He also dramatically overstates how much Greek culture was borrowed from Egypt, claiming that basically all Greek religion came from Egypt, which modern scholars have largely rejected. He was so desperate to make Egypt seem like the ancient mother civilization that he retrofitted a narrative onto his observations. He also famously claims that the Nile floods were because of melting snow in the African interior. This is wrong. The Nile floods were because of monsoon rains in Ethiopia. But beyond being wrong, it's impressively wrong, because anyone who'd spent serious time in Egypt would know that Egypt doesn't get snow, and the African interior is desert. The idea of massive snowfields there should have been obviously questionable even to an ancient Greek, but Herodotus reported like a man who has never been challenged in his life. Here's something I genuinely respect though, and I want to give this to him, because it's intellectually honest to do so. Herodotus occasionally tells on himself. He'll present multiple conflicting accounts of the same event and just leave them there. He'll say the Spartans said this, but the Athenians said this, and here's a third version from someone else, and I'll let you decide. In a weird way, that's actually a more sophisticated historiographical move than it looks. He's acknowledging uncertainty and presenting his sources, but it also means his work reads less like history and more like a collection of contradictory rumors that someone printed and bound together. He is simultaneously more honest and less reliable than most historians who came after him. And somehow that combination produces a worse outcome than just being overconfident. Let's also briefly touch on his stories about Scythia, because they deserve attention. The Scythians were a nomadic people living north of the Black Sea, and Herodotus wrote about them extensively. He described their burial practices, their culture, their military tactics. Some of this, astonishingly, has been verified by archaeology. Scythian burial mounds have been excavated, and they do indeed contain the kinds of grave goods and sacrificed horses Herodotus described, so he gets a point there. But he also claims the Scythians would get high by throwing hemp seeds onto hot stones in a tent and inhaling the smoke, which they apparently loved. This one is also true. Archaeological evidence confirms this practice, so Herodotus correctly documented that Scythians were hotboxing tents in 450 BC. That's what makes him so maddening. He'll be completely right about the Scythian cannabis rituals and completely insane about the giant gold-digging ants. The man has the accuracy of a broken clock, which means he is right just enough that you can't entirely dismiss him, but wrong enough that you can't fully trust him. He is the ancient world's Wikipedia, useful as a starting point, terrifying as a primary source. So what's the verdict? Is Herodotus the father of history or the father of historical fiction? Honestly, both. That's the real takeaway here. He pioneered a form of inquiry that was genuinely new. He traveled, he asked questions, he tried to understand foreign cultures with a degree of empathy that was unusual for his time. He's notably less dismissive of non-Greek peoples than most of his contemporaries. That's meaningful. His work preserves details about the ancient world that we simply wouldn't have otherwise. But he was also a man operating with no real methodology, no critical standard for evaluating sources, and apparently a complete inability to say, that sounds fake, when someone describes a fox-sized ant. If Herodotus were alive today, he would be the guy in your friend group who comes back from a trip abroad with incredible stories, some of which are genuinely insightful, some of which are obviously exaggerated, and at least one of which involves a creature that definitely doesn't exist. And you'd enjoy the stories. You'd have a great time, but you would absolutely not cite him in your thesis. The father of history was also, in the most loving way, an academic way, I can say this, kind of full of it. And that's why you still read him. Thank you for watching. If you liked the video, please press like and subscribe for more, and give us some ideas in the comments about what topics we should discuss next. Thank you and good night.